Welcome, Hotshots, to the Firepower X Self-Command portal. Here you can find the industrial strength tools you need to dominate your personal and professional wellness. My name is Jess. I'm boss lady here at Firepower X, former firefighter, and host for today's webinar. And it's my absolute pleasure to have an amazing conversation today with our special guest, EMS and Fire Chief Robert Weisbaum of Crested, Butte Fire Protection District. His commitment to public safety spans 24 years of dedicated service, and he's no stranger to adversity. He was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2022, and since then, Rob has totally transformed his life. It's quite amazing. His purpose now includes motivating first responders to address the impact of stress on mind, body, and spirit to enhance overall well-being. And you may recognize Rob from our October conference where he spoke on one of our expert panels. It was a pleasure to host him then, and again, a pleasure to host him now. So welcome back, Rob. We're so happy you're joining us today.
Thanks, Jess. I'm honored to be here, and I'm excited about the conversation we're going to have over the next hour or so, and hopefully we can be impactful to those listening.
Yes. And I am really intrigued at the things we're going to talk about today, because I really believe of, a lot of the speakers that we had at the conference, you and I, our philosophies are pretty closely aligned from what I've seen. So I'm excited to kind of dig in. And I'd love to start with, I was poking around on your website before we met today and found a quote that I would love for you to unpack for us: the "stop talking about it, be about it." What does that mean to you? Like, tell us what that means.
Yeah, so I think there's importance in having the comfortability to talk about it, but at the end of the day, you have to put action to it. So over the years, what I found is just in conversations with people is we do talk a lot about this stuff, which is awesome and great that we do, but are people actually put into action? So at some point, we have to actually kind of move into the next step of taking action and putting all that talk into work. And so I know that sometimes that phrase alone can be a little bit off-putting and say, well, maybe we shouldn't be talking about it and just do an action. And that's not the point of it. The point is, hey, it's awesome. It's open for discussion. It's time to get to work now. And that's the whole premise around it.
Mm-hmm. And that, I think that dovetails well into mindset as well, and growth mindset, and some of the things we're going to get deeper into today. And to me, mindset and being it, like demonstrating it, being it, like those, I think mindset is one of the kind of weak points right now in the fire service. I'm going to be bold and make that declaration, but would you agree with that? Do you think that's where a lot of kind of the issues of fire service is having right now are, do you think they come from mindset and action? What do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that we're seeing in society today is as technology continues to advance, it gets easier and easier to lose sight of human connection. And what I find are people are kind of going into their own cubbies, and we're losing sight of how we interact with each other. And when we do that, we lose that ability to communicate, and we lose the ability to communicate effectively, especially when we have adversity. And that is the most critical component of effective communication, is calling out BS when you need to. And if you have a problem with it, talking to your crews, your colleagues, and really kind of practicing that just culture within an organization so that you can approach it, manage it, get over it, and move on. And with a mindset mentality of growth mindset, you're going to have adversity. You're going to have hard times. That's a reality of life. But if you set that aside, things just get worse and worse and worse. And what I'm seeing, I'm very observational in nature, and I always have been. And there's so much exterior input come into our lives that are negative. And I've learned by really training my mind to focus on the positives, I don't see the negative anymore. And you can actually train yourself to view that. Now, if you're always looking at the negative, guess what you're going to see? Always the negative. And I think that's an important thing to be able to understand, is the more you control those variables that you can, the better you can strengthen your mind.
Mhm. Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. And it kind of bleeds into stoicism. I don't know if you've are a fan of stoicism, but that control what you can and kind of what you can't, you learn to release. And I'm curious how, being a chief, like how do you impart this with your crews? Like how do you translate, it's easier, I think, to do it for ourselves, but then when it comes to teaching others, what kind of examples are you setting right now for them?
Yeah, so I think, one of the concepts are, if I'm going to preach something to somebody, I better be living by it. And I think this is where leadership has a real opportunity to be impactful to their crews versus talking about it, not being about it, right? And so for me, outside of focusing on me and saying, hey, I'm going to be the best version of myself that I can be, I know that I have to evidence that through my actions. And I'm going to hope that my crew and my team see what I'm doing with my actions so that they say, oh, hey, and that's going to hopefully prompt them to ask more questions. Outside of that, what I'm doing is trying to formulate programs that I know have worked for me, but are also researched and studied as far as health and wellness, and saying, hey, this is what I want you to do for the organization. And it's only to benefit yourselves and our community and those we serve. And it's not to be viewed as, oh, this is just another thing we need to do. I'm actually really interested in the overall health and well-being of our membership because we have to be strong, both mentally, physically, spiritually, to be able to serve. And so I think evidence by action, and it comes directly from me. And if I'm doing it, hopefully they'll see it and they'll want to do it. At the end of the day, we can't actually control people's behaviors. That'll never change. It has to be on them. They have to take the onus on it. But I'm hoping that people recognize that and see it and want to kind of not necessarily emulate, but find their own path and say, hey, he seems a lot happier. Okay, he's smiling more. All the benefits of kind of taking this on.
Mhm. Do you find that they are more interested by when you have kind of a more formal training, or did they find that you're really getting the most response from others in the fire service when they hear your story? What's been your experience with that?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of communication surrounded by it. I think on a large scale, people see what I'm doing, but don't often comment on it.
Mhm.
What I like to do though is uh, when I have the opportunity, I join them in the gym. I go work out with them. I spend time with them. And it's during those times we have the opportunity to speak a little bit. And I'm not chief, I'm just Rob. Hey, we're getting a good sweat in, we're feeling good. And hey, thanks for spending the time with me. But I also understand that there needs to be a separation between myself and the crews, and I want to give them that space. I think as I speak more and more to other people in other departments, this is where we're failing. Are there are programs that aren't being enforced, or they don't see it as a priority as far as health and wellness. Although they're talking about it, the reality is on a large scale, they don't have programs to say, hey, I need to do some sort of physical activity every single day, and here's why. And as a chief officer, we have to be able to explain the why. What's the benefit? And if you can't articulate that message, it's not going to get through the crews. So I know that, when people listen to this and hear this, they're like, oh, I don't want, the reality is we just got to do it. And there's important reasons behind it. And, there's going to be naysayers and there are people that are going to dog on it and say, no, we don't have time for this. And my argument would be, we always have time for it if you make time for it, if it's important enough for you. And that just means you have to change some things around throughout your day and prioritize it.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, I'm curious what, when it comes to taking responsibility, that kind of opens up into taking responsibility for our own lives. And where is the balance between the responsibility the department has, to train wellness versus where the individual should be taking responsibility for their own wellness? Who has more responsibility? What's your views on this, and how we balance the department versus the individual?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, the individual has to take 100% ownership and accountability for their own actions, period. Uh, the organization itself needs to provide the avenue and the pathway to help develop those skills, provide the programs to enable them so that they can actually do the things that we're asking for. Now, if we're saying we want you to do this, but we're not providing any programs for you to actually achieve it, it does us no good. And it's hard to hold people accountable for it. And at the end of the day, people are not necessarily going to take that full responsibility because they say, well, we don't have the programs in place. So I think there's a balance between organizational leadership, culture, and individuals. But at the same time, the individual has to want to do it, and they have to have, as Jocko says, extreme ownership of themselves, 100% accountability and responsibility.
Yeah. Is that, I completely agree. And I think, yeah, the department as facilitator, almost as influencer, because I loved the example of you being in the gym. I think when your senior leadership is right alongside you, you know, doing PT, talking about wellness, I think that creates a culture where it's okay. It's okay to be, you know, it's acceptable. It's like you give people permission to be well almost because you're also participating in it. So yeah, no, I love that example. And I just want to circle back to taking full responsibility for yourself. And because you have been through a lot, my friend, and you have triumphed over it. And I'm just curious, did you always kind of have that mindset of taking full responsibility for yourself, or did what you've experienced kind of catalyze that more? Did it come out? Did it
Yeah,
arise from the events?
yeah. So this goes all the way back to when I was 5 years old, and my parents started me in martial arts, Taekwondo, and I
Mm,
think that was really outside of the family values, the foundation that was set for me. And so I really learned about discipline and hard work and kind of the values I learned through martial arts. And one of the moments my dad said to me, and people kind of cringe when I say this, I was, I think, 11 or 12 years old. He goes, if I can tell you anything in life, he goes, just understand this, Rob. He goes, nobody gives a shit about you. So you better take care of yourself.
wow.
And people are like, oh God. And I'm like, I know what he means. My parents love me. My family loves me. My sister loves me. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, I have to look out for myself. I have to be my own self advocate and not wait for other people to come hold my hand. And I don't want that to sound offensive, but you have to take the lead for your own actions. And so it's always been a part of my life from an early age on. And I've always lived by that and never looked to other people to help guide my path. Now, of course, there have been people along the road that have helped me with that, and I'm very grateful for them and appreciate. And they've helped me develop into who I am today. But
Mhm.
I was fortunate that from an early age, it's been embedded in me. So making these transformations during kind of these seminal life events that have happened throughout my life,
Mhm.
I won't say it was easy. It was hard work, but
Yeah.
it gave me the ability to do it.
Mhm. And they're a testament to, I think, how, you know, how effective that mindset is. I think of really like, especially, I think with coming from, let's say, for example, you know, the skydiving incident you had and getting, you know, hearing a doctor tell you what your future is going to be, but then, you know, you deciding otherwise. So how can you kind of go into, you know, that instance a little bit more about, you know, were you ever challenged to be like, maybe he's right? Like, did you have moments where or were you like, no, from the beginning? Like, no, that's not my future. It's not my reality. So,
Yeah, no, I definitely had self-doubt. I mean, one of the things that I've learned over the last several years, especially in being a chief role, is I'm human. I'm not perfect, not even near it. And I have emotions and I have my bad days. And going all the way back to then when the doctor said start looking for other jobs, you're never going to work at that as a firefighter paramedic again. I got scared and I
mm,
got fearful. I said, what am I going to do? I'm just starting out in my career. I
mhm,
don't know what else I could possibly do, especially having an injured and broken body.
mhm,
But that didn't last long. It's
mhm,
kind of, you got to flip the switch, and that's what I did. Is I said, all right, who's this guy that knows nothing about me, and I'm not going to let him tell me what my prognosis is. Fine, you're giving me a diagnosis. Fantastic, thank you very much. help me on my recovery, but I'm going to keep moving forward and I'm going to prove you wrong. And I wasn't necessarily doing it for him, it was for me. And I said, I knew that I was absolutely in love with serving others and I love this job and this profession. And I got to find a way to continue to do so. And I think that's what gave me the willpower to continue fighting forward. And it took a lot of pain, a lot of hard work, a lot of hard dedication, but it also
Mhm.
took a lot of support from very close people of mine, friends and family.
Mhm. That's awesome. Yeah, having that is incredible, an incredible resource. And you kind of touch on, the power of perspective and choice in that scenario, and choosing, getting to choose, getting data from the doctor, but then choosing beyond that. And it sounds like you use kind of your values to stay in that power, or do you have, what's your strategy, I guess? I'll let you explain that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So there's a couple things in this world that no one can take away from this, and that's the power of choice and the power of perspective.
Mhm.
So I used to take things very personally, without a doubt. My emotions would get in the way. I can recognize that. And the hardest part around that was saying, why am I blaming others for things that are happening in my life? And why am I taking it personally? I said, because I'm human. That's human nature. It's in our biology. But the fun and interesting part is you can actually control that and learn to change that. So when I go ahead and start dissecting the past events that happened in my life and change the perspective and understand that everything that happens in this world happens for a reason. And whether it's negative or positive, it's led to who I am today as a person. And I can choose to be grumpy man and I'm a victim of the world and situation and circumstance and environment, or I can say, no, I'm the victor. And you know what? No matter what adversity I face, I'm going to beat it. I'm going to overcome it. And that's part of that building mental toughness and grit. And even with having emotions, is okay, you just got to get over it. You can't stay in a state where you're always like that. If you do, you're not going to progress forward. You're not going to get well, and you're not going to be able to beat whatever you're beating as far as adversity comes. As far as my values, my values have been set, and I use that a lot. And I've had mentors in my life that help solidify and strengthen those. And I can go into those if you want, and I can list them off real quick. So I have 5 core values, and that's being courteous, having integrity, perseverance, self-control, and indomitable spirit. And
Mhm.
those are my 5 core values that I live by.
Mhm.
And it's hard to find those, but everybody's capable of finding those. You just have to really do a lot of self-inflection and reflection to see what is important in your life. And I think early on, I've always recognized that serving others and just being nice and being a good is part of who I am,
Mhm.
and I'm going to continue to do that. So that helps, kind of, enforce how I live my life.
Mhm. Yeah, how do I find with my core values, like sometimes I use them as like a council at a table, and I'll have each of them like stand up. Like perseverance stands up and says, this is what I would do in this situation. How do you more like finely tune like which core value you're going to act from or choose from?
It's situational.
Mm.
So if I'm in uh, a debate or an argument or a situation that's happening that's making me frustrated or I'm getting angry, that's where self control comes in, right? Hey, I have to manage my emotions, understand that words matter, and the way that I'm going to say whatever I'm going to say next can have a big impact on the person on the other end.
Mhm.
So it's completely situational. Courtesy, right? Being good. There's that's kind of one of those things where you just in my opinion always have to do be a good person, right? And but it is situational on when to enact those. And I think over time you just learn to develop that skill, and understand when and where and why it's important to say, hey, all right, now it's time for me to have an indomitable spirit. Nobody's going to break me. Hey, I got a new diagnosis. Cool, let's move on. Right.
Mhm.
And so I think to answer that, that's the way it. you just have to reflect and take a moment, step back, and say, all right, what do I have to do? And
Mhm.
which of those values do I have to enact right now? And it becomes second nature.
It does. No, I love that idea of thinking of them as a resource, and drawing from them, because when we intentionally choose them, it's who we are. It's again like coming back to that beingness, like this is what I have intentionally chosen to be. And so pulling upon, those qualities as a resource and then, exemplifying them. I think that's great.
Yeah.
And for those who did attend the conference, I had given you a little link below the core values exercise. If you haven't identified your core values, it's an awesome, I think, personal growth thing to do. When did you start working with core values, Rob? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So I mean, truly at the start of my martial arts when I was young, 5 years old. So these were plastered across the walls, and we had to repeat them daily during our practice. So it kind of just become embedded in your brain and your mind. And I did martial arts all the way through high school. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
oh yeah. So it was a very early start for me,
Mhm.
and easy for me to continue living by those every day, just because it was such a young age. And I think we're so impressionable for the future mothers and fathers out there. There's some science research and studies that show between the age of 3 and 7, you know, this is when the developmental stage of kids truly is developed more so than adulthood or early age. So um, I was lucky enough to be in that in that timeline by no choice of my own, but thankful to my parents for doing that.
Mhm. I think that's awesome. And have your core values changed much from then to now? I mean, that's quite an expanse and so many experiences you've gone through, but have which ones have stayed the same and which have changed? I'm just curious.
So those five have definitely changed.
Mhm.
Or I mean, sorry, I apologize. Stayed the same. Now, have I added additional ones? Without question,
Mhm.
right? And a lot of it for me, so some of the other values is really looking at just adding hard work, discipline, consistency, and you can argue those are values or just things that you're doing to enact those values. But I think there's the ability to modify, add to, delete if you need to, and change as you grow older. Because the reality is, when you get older, your life changes and things may just adjust accordingly. And those change, especially if you have a family, your values might change. You have kids, those might change a little bit. I think at the root system of it, though, those five definitely define who I am as a person, and those will never change. Now,
Mhm.
will I additionally, add some down the road? For sure, without a doubt. And I think that's the fun part of this whole journey is you don't have to define and stick to those. You can always add, subtract, modify for your whole life. And that's the joy in it is getting to figure out what is important to you. And the only person that can figure that out is yourself.
Oh, for sure. Tony Robbins, he does a lot with core values, and he emphasizes the importance of when you're aiming for a new role or identity to pick, to identify whatever core value you're going to embody in that role, and then start practicing. Um, and I know I've used that, but I'm curious, when you became chief, which did you find then you added some new core values as chief and being in, a leadership position?
Yeah, for sure. I recognize the need that I really had to exercise more humility, being more humble, and
Mm-hmm.
teamwork. Uh, Teamwork has always been a part of it because we're just in that profession where you have to rely on your colleagues. It could be life or death. But being humble and showing a level of humility as a leader is so critical to being an effective leader, and really understanding how to have effective communication. And I'll be honest, my first, several years of being a chief, I failed time and time and time again, and it impacted my crew. And I feel, bad about being so close-minded about that and allowing my emotions to get in the way of the overall performance to the team. And the important take home for that is, at least you got to recognize it and then change. And if you grow upon that, that's good. That's life. That's what's supposed to happen. And that eliminates those toxic leaders. But we hear it about time and time again. The toxic leaders, toxic management, right? They're so set in stone into what they think is right. So that really taught me what it means to have humility, to shut up and listen more, and be humble, and really, be that person they can look to and trust. So yeah, I mean, I think, I definitely added more values coming into this role, without a doubt.